Morning and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago. Now, a lot has been happening on the island of Tobago, and it's sad that we have to start off on such a somber note with yet another murder on the island. Ah, This speaks to that proposal that we have seen coming from the THA regarding that Tobago House of Assembly proposition for the Department of Public Safety and Security. And we hope to hear a lot more about that later on in the show as we chat with Chief Technical Advisor Mr. Anselm Richards, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Tomorrow, we might talk a bit about what we saw happening there yesterday. We know that there was a lot happening, a lot of excitement in the TPP camp, where the Tobago People's Party held their internal elections, and we had a number of preliminary results regarding those positions. And I don't want to talk too fast because it seems as the party doesn't want to comment too much on that until they have their confirmation of those results. I mean, I guess rightfully so. So after 12 o'clock this morning, I guess we're going to have the confirmation of those results. But I would have had a couple of interviews previously, not last week, but the week right before Beryl touched our shores, and I would have chatted with a number of their candidates and some of their candidates for that were vying for that chairman position. I chatted with and Natasha Second, as well as Chrislyn Moore and Trevor James. And it seemed to me from that preliminary result that Anne Natasha Second ended up coming out on top as the chairperson for the party, but these are still unconfirmed results. So we look forward to hearing more about that and how that entire internal election process went. But this morning we are chatting about the economy and diversification. And when we chatted with the Chief Secretary last Thursday at the Fairway restaurant, in our extended episode, we spoke about means of diversifying the economy as well as the source of financing for Tobago, as Tobago typically doesn't get what it requests from the central government. So the conversation is in the space regarding investment funding, private investment funding, venture capital funding, and all of that. And for a lot of us, we don't necessarily understand the terms, or what does that mean, and what is the criteria, and where does that put our country? Does the FIU come in there? We're asking so many questions. We don't know the terms, we don't know the terminology. We just know it's economics. And for some of us, it goes over our head. But this morning we're chatting with Barry Joefield, and he's gonna kind of break that down a bit for us and help us understand how venture capital funding and companies can help to contribute to diversifying Tobago's source of income and expenditure, and how we are going to create funds to help Tobagonians abroad to invest in Tobago's economy. Good morning, Mr. Joefield, and welcome, and thank you again for coming on this morning.
Morning, Shenell, and thank you for having me this morning.
Right, so I've chatted a bit about the challenge when Tobago requests funding and doesn't necessarily get the funding that it needs. And we heard in the budget presentation that the Chief Secretary is talking about creating Tobago-based funds that allow individuals to invest in Tobago. But this morning you're talking about venture capital funding, and not only how that affects the private sector, but how that affects the public sector. So talk to us a bit about that this morning.
All right, so I just need to go back before I, deal with the current circumstance. Somewhere around 2012, in the previous administration, they formed this Tobago Venture Capital Company. It was seeded with 25 million seed capital. THA put this money into the fund. The idea from that initial seed capital was for the fund to be expanded or investments made to increase this fund to 100 million. Think of if that occurred, let's say, 10 years ago, the multiply effect of 100 million to date, I doubt we would have an argument with respect to development funding in Tobago. And therein lies the power of venture capital to seed capital with entrepreneurs so that they can do what entrepreneurs do, create business in Tobago, expand the economic framework in Tobago. However, the construct of a venture capital company is one where the key element in this company is what you call a fund manager. this company requires somebody who understands economics, finance, who is now able to mobilize capital. I think I heard there was some week, I think it was probably last week, Mr. McFarlane, and I think it was the Tobago chamber person, talking about the fact that venture capital was not providing capital to entrepreneurs and so on, for want of trying to explain what they were saying at the time. And that is the secondary aspect of venture capital. The primary aspect of venture capital is to raise the capital in the first place. And the fact that no capital has been raised between 2012 and now says that the company has been non-functional. So from 2012 to now, no capital has been raised in venture capital. And therein lies the challenge. The talk now about diaspora investments and so on. This is where the venture capital fund was actually supposed to be operating, getting the diaspora to invest in it. In fact, I have the strategic plan document here that speaks to going to the diaspora and getting the diaspora to invest. So it's really a function of the fact that venture capital is not functioning the way it's supposed to. But it can't, because the key element in the fund is the fund manager. It has been prescribed by the Executive Council Minute 2012. It's prescribed by the Venture Capital Act. It's prescribed by the policy. It's prescribed by the strategic plan. And from 2012 to now, that key element is missing, and it has created no end of problems in the company that would not be solved by a new board of directors.
Well, Mr. Joefield, surprisingly or not surprisingly, I have never heard about the venture capital fund for Tobago. I'm actually unaware of the fact that we had it set up. So was it set up under an independent company, or was it under the Division of Finance? Explain to us, were you a part of the planning for the strategic plan for the venture capital fund for Tobago, and you would have projected by now you should have seen like 100 million in that fund?
All right. This was done since 2012, right? That would have been under the former administration as well. And therein lies the challenge. It's an issue of understanding what venture capital is supposed to do. And if you look at the last administration into this administration, the same issue exists. And the reason is you don't have a fund manager to manage a fund. And it behooves me as to why that has not been done. But the point is, and the reason you haven't heard about venture capital is because, again, this is part of the role of the fund manager, and there was supposed to be some other professionals like a marketing and promotions officer. The company has been staffed with professional staff.
So there is a company. There is a company. So explain to us the structure that exists, because I know when they talk about venture capital, because I know of one venture capital firm in the US called the Fearless Fund, which is usually used to fund Black women in business. And I know that it is organized as a LLC, and then they usually do, they will go and get funding to fund these businesses of these young women. So that's what I'm asking. What is the current business structure like in Trinidad and Tobago for that?
Well, let me just focus a bit on Tobago, right? The current structure is that you kind of just have maybe one professional or two running an institution that is supposed to be raising 100 million in funds, and that's
so it's
just
not registered as
it's registered as a company.
Okay,
it's
right,
registered
exactly.
as a company.
That's what I'm getting to.
But it's under the aegis of the finance division.
Right.
And in fact, that may be part of the challenge. The way the company was supposed to be constructed is that the directorship should have come from the persons who risk capital to invest in it. So let's say, for instance, you have a team in New York investing $5 million into the venture capital fund. Then they would have a director on that venture capital board to oversee that $5 million
Their
that
interests,
they put in.
exactly.
If you had Mount Pleasant Credit Union investing $5 million into this fund, they would now have a director on the board to oversee their interest. So you have directors of investors into the company overseeing their interest. What you currently have now is that the only investor here is the THA, and therefore all the directors are selected by the state, which is even not what is recommended in the strategic plan, because there are obvious reasons why. And if it existed like that for the last 12 years, just be clear that there is an issue that goes beyond administration. The issue is about the construct of the company and how the company functions to deliver the service that it's supposed to deliver. And the 100 million could be 100 million every year. It doesn't have to be 100 million one-off. So, I mean, you could have been raising 100 million every year and providing this capital to build a marina, to, invest in redevelopment of Scarborough, etc., as the case may be, to retool study park quarries. There's so many things you could do with the money that, it behooves me as to why, the powers that be across administrations, and we need to make that point. It's across administrations, and therefore, to me, there's a lack of understanding of how you make a venture capital company work, and the fact that you don't have a fund manager is the primary reason, because that was said to be the critical success factor of one of them, and the next one was a stream of interest to the company. I mean, Tobago Updates probably could have benefited from venture capital investment to expand its reach and so on. So the company is an important company for Tobago. It's an important company to get operating.
I'm glad that you raised this topic, and I'm glad that you see it as being an important addition to the economic conversation where Tobago is concerned now, specifically where the budget had just been presented, and Tobago is looking for different avenues as a source of, the type of capital that is needed for a number of these development projects. And one of the things that I want to bring into the conversation is the fact that there is indeed a new sitting Secretary for Finance, a woman at that, and someone who has been in a technical position as the chief accounting officer for the THA for a long time. And she is someone who comes with a lot of experience. So don't you think that this is a conversation that she may be interested in, if you would bring it up to her, to see how they can revamp that entire venture capital fund as they are seeking other sources of financing for Tobago?
And I think that should be one of the primary strategies, because I think it was on Friday, there was an interview, I think.
On Tuesday.
Last Tuesday. And the issue appeared to be, or the concern appeared to be, how do you get more money from Trinidad? And I don't know. And I think the more important conversation is, how do we use the vehicle that we already have to generate this money that we could do things in Tobago, even outside of having to look for monies coming from Trinidad? Because let me just share this with you. 2 points I want to share with you. While we were at, and I just heard you talk about the number of murders and so on. While we shared with you, while you just shared about the number of murders increasing in Tobago, and I remember at there's a consultation for the Constitution, and Dr. Farrell made a very telling statement. And he said that in 1962, we produced, I think it was about 268,000 barrels of oil. Today, we are producing just over 50,000, he said. And gas is not doing much better. If we continue to peg our economic hopes on a 10% from Trinidad, it's going to be a 10% of a declining amount, because the Trinidad and Tobago economy is declining. There's no two ways about it. So quibble over 10%, it will be 10% of a reducing amount, which will not be in the best interest of Tobago. So we have a responsibility to begin, and then he went further to the point of murders, to say that if we thought 1990 was bad, because it came about as a lot of austerity measures were being put in place in Trinidad and Tobago. He said there are a lot of young men with big guns this time around, and it will not be as simple as it was on the last occasion. And we are seeing gradually in Tobago that kind of seepage, and there are real issues to be treated in terms of the economic front that's going to help us to manage that aspect of crime, because crime also needs resources for scanners, resources for the same safety unit and so on. So you need resources, and we have to find a way to be more responsible and manage the things that we can manage, like the venture capital company, to generate the kind of resources we need to generate in order for Tobago to progress and develop.
All right, economist Joefield. So I'm guessing that from our conversation, the next step for you is that conversation with the new finance secretary in regards to revamping that company.
Well, I don't know that I have that kind of reach and influence, but if indeed a discussion is required, I have no difficulty at all having the discussion because I think I understand, I'm seized of what should be done, how it should be done, and I am clear in my own mind that it is one of the major vehicles, one of the major planks that we should be hanging our hopes on, that we can have a control over to get funding going, because it's being done in Jamaica. Jamaica is doing an excellent job of it. It's being done in Kenya. It's being done all over the world. I mean, Israel. I mean, Tobago is no different. I think we can generate the kind of resources we need to generate to develop Tobago without constantly the Trinidad issue, which might be an important conversation, yes, but not the conversation I think we need to be having.
All right. Well, thank you for using Tobago Updates this morning as your vehicle to advocate for the restructuring of that venture capital company within the THA. Guys, we're going to take a quick break right here and we'll be back right after this. See you soon.